Hello and welcome to Standard 6 of the Care Certificate Workbooks. My name is Daniel Dutton and I run the website dsdweb.co.uk, which provides free help, guidance and support for people that are studying for care qualifications. I'm a little bunged up today, so apologies if my voice sounds a little nasal and the mic picks up my sniffling. In this video, we will be looking at Standard 6 Communication. This standard looks at how care workers can communicate effectively and the importance of adapting communication styles depending on the needs of the individual. We will also discuss confidentiality in the workplace. For further information about this standard, visit DSDWeb by clicking the link in the description. Although this video contains sample answers, these should be taken as a guide only to help you understand how the questions should be answered. It is important that you reflect on how these principles relate to your own workplace and practice and write your own answers in your own words based on your own experience. This should be a learning activity rather than a copying activity. But before we go on, I'd like to ask you to like this video by clicking the thumbs up button and to subscribe to my channel. This helps me to gauge the interest in my videos and decide whether or not to create more. It also takes me 2 full days work to create one of these videos, so I would like to know if they are beneficial to others. Anyway, let's get started. The first question asks you to describe 5 different types of communication. Obviously, the most common is verbal, which is essentially speaking and listening. Most of us use this as our primary communication method throughout our day-to-day work. Second, we have reading and writing, care plans, daily notes, mark sheets, appointments, etc. They're all ways that we will use the written word in our work. Now, have a think about other methods of communication you use in your own practice. Perhaps look at the communication section in the care plans of your service users. If you work with individuals that have learning disabilities, you may use Makaton gestures or visual aids to communicate. Individuals with visual impairments may require formats such as Braille or audio. They may use a text-to-speech synthesizer when using their computers. Individuals with hearing impairments may use BSL, British Sign Language, or require you to face them when you are addressing them so that they can read your lips. The next question asks you to give examples of good and poor communication in the workplace. Think about times when good communication has made it easier to perform your role or help to support service users. This could be bouncing around ideas with your colleagues during a team meeting, or clearly written instructions for using a particular advice, or, as in the example given, it may be useful feedback given to you by your manager during your supervision to help improve your practice. Conversely, try to think of times when communication has failed or not been so effective. The example in the slide suggests omitting information during handover. However, you could also consider a poorly written company policy that is ambiguous, or a professional partner using clinical jargon that you do not understand. Activity 6.1c. Imagine you are talking to an individual about a change to their care plan. During the conversation, which starts very relaxed, you notice that the person starts getting fidgety and avoiding eye contact. Their body language changes, they turn sideways on their chair so they no longer face you. Why is it important that you notice the changes in the other person's reactions? And why is it important that you respond to the changes in the other person's reactions? It is important to be observant during discussions because body language, facial expressions, and other gestures can be a method of non-verbal communication. In the example given, the sudden change in eye contact and body language could indicate that the individual is unhappy with the particular subject you are discussing. They may be unhappy with the changes to their care plan that you are proposing. You may have inadvertently said something that they found offensive. They may be embarrassed about the topic of conversation because the changes you are proposing are in response to a behaviour they are ashamed of, or they may simply just not understand what you have said. It is essential that these changes are responded to courteously, compassionately, and empathetically. to establish the root cause and to find a mutually acceptable solution. Part 1 of Activity 6.2a asks you to list 4 ways to establish an individual's needs, wishes, and preferences. Perhaps the most obvious is to ask the individual themselves. If they are non-verbal, you may try out different methods of communicating with them directly to find out what works and what doesn't. The individual's family will often have a wealth of information about how to communicate with them best, as can professionals that have worked with them previously, such as psychologists or speech and language therapists. And of course, the individual's unique communication needs, wishes, and preferences should be documented in their care plan. Part 2 of Activity 6.2a asks you to explain how each of the methods you listed in Part 1 could be used. We already discussed this in the previous slide, so we'll skip to the next question. But if you want to read the text on the screen, simply pause the video. The next question asks you to list 6 different styles of communication that you use in your practice. Again, think about the communication needs and preferences of the individuals that you work with directly, and refer to the communication section of their care plans. The first one, touch, is provided for you. This could refer to tactile communication styles that visually impaired individuals may use, such as braille or the spinning cone at traffic lights. Or it may refer to the provision of comfort and reassurance, for example, from holding hands or an arm around the shoulder. Some individuals may prefer verbal communication. However, you may have to adapt the way you talk to them. For example, you may need to speak slower, use a different tone, ensure the individual can see your lips, or limit sentences to 1 or 2 keywords. The written word may be used to communicate with individuals, for example, to provide information or make requests. However, again, you may have to adjust the way it is presented. You may need to write clearly and block capitals, keep sentences simple, or use large print. Gestures can include universal methods such as BSL, British Sign Language, or Makaton, or gestures that are specific to the individual. For example, an individual may make the letter T with their hands to indicate that they would like a cup of tea, or point to the bathroom door to communicate that they need the toilet. We spoke about the importance of body language, eye contact, and facial expressions earlier, and our language and dialect that we use can also have a great bearing on our ability to communicate effectively. If we do not share the same language as the person we are talking to, we may have difficulty communicating. However, if we share the same language, we can communicate easier, and if it is a minority language, it can help to form bonds with the individual. The same is true with accents and dialects. Individuals may feel more comfortable with carers that have the same geographical accent as themselves, but again, different accents and dialects can make comprehension harder. Similarly, the use of slang and jargon may make it difficult to understand unless the individual themselves use that same vocabulary. The next question asks you to make a list of 4 barriers to communication and how they could be reduced. Barriers are things that reduce the ability to communicate effectively. The example provided is substance abuse. If an individual's behaviour is affected because of the misuse of substances, I need to think carefully about how I will use my communication skills to make sure the individual is supported. If they are frustrated and angry, I will need to use a calming tone of voice and relaxed body language, but maintain a safe distance. Other examples could include a loud background noise, in which case you could change the location, reschedule for another time, or if the source of the noise is outside, such as construction workers, simply closing the window may make a big difference. Language barriers can be solved by providing an interpreter in the short term and in the long term arranging classes and training. Visual impairments could be solved by providing materials in audio or braille format. Hunger. We've all been hangry. which is a term that means angry due to hunger. If we have a physiological need such as hunger, it can negatively affect how we communicate. So maybe we should just have a snack first. Similarly, if we have another physiological need such as we are tired, it may be better to reschedule the meeting for the next day when we are fully rested. The next question asks you how you would check that the points you have made during a conversation have been understood by the other person. Of course, during the conversation, you should observe the body language and the facial expressions of the individual for any signs that they may not have understood what you have said. You should regularly ask after each point if they understand what you are saying and confirm this by asking them to repeat it back to you in their own words. It is also useful before ending the discussion that you review each of the points made to reinforce comprehension and ask if they have any questions. Next, you are asked to think about an individual at your workplace that you struggle to communicate with. This could be a service user or a co-worker. Who could help you to improve communication and how could they do this? So, for example, you may care for an individual that often ignores you when you try to converse with them. You may speak to your manager or more experienced co-workers who may be able to provide advice about how they communicate with the individual from their own experience. Your manager may also book you onto a training course. The individual's family may also be able to provide valuable insights about the individual's unique communication preferences. In addition, other professionals such as speech and language therapists may assist with improving communication. Activity 6.4a asks you to explain what confidentiality means to you and your job role. You will find it beneficial to refer to your own job description and your own organisation's policies and procedures when doing this exercise. Confidentiality in health and social care means respecting an individual's right to privacy and not discussing their personal information with anyone else unless they provide consent or there is a justifiable cause, such as a safeguarding issue. Not only is this an ethical responsibility, but also a legal requirement. The next question asks you to list legislation and agreed ways of working, that is your organisation's policies and procedures, that relate to confidentiality. Legislation can include the Data Protection Act 2018 and GDPR, which legislates how personal information can be used. The Human Rights Act 1998, which gives everyone the right to privacy, and the Freedom of Information Act 2000, which governs the disclosure of information held by public authorities and their partners. Your organisation's agreed ways of working may include a confidentiality policy, an access to information policy, an information storage and sharing policy, or a data protection policy. Obviously, you're going to have to check your own organisation's policies and procedures to answer this one correctly. Sometimes confidential information may need to be shared even if the individual does not wish to give their consent. This may be because there is a safeguarding concern. For example, an individual may disclose to you that another care worker has assaulted them, but not want to tell anybody because they are afraid of repercussions. You will be obliged to report this to your manager and/or safeguarding lead because the individual would be at risk. Another example would be if an individual was involved in an accident and were unconscious. You would need to pass on their personal details, including any medication that had been prescribed to them, to the paramedics or hospital staff. Finally, an individual may disclose to you that they are planning to cause significant harm to another individual, in which case you will be obligated by your duty of care to pass this information on to your manager or other authorities. Taking the example from the previous question where an individual informs you that they were assaulted by another care worker, you will be obligated under your duty of care to inform your manager immediately. Your manager would then be able to advise you on what to do next. This may include preserving evidence and reassuring the client that they will be protected. They should also ask you to make a written record of what has been said whilst it is fresh in your memory and advise that it will be dealt with swiftly by the safeguarding officer. And we've come to the end of this standard. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found it useful. If you require any additional help or want to send feedback about this video, please feel free to use the comments section below or visit my website dsdweb.co.uk. The link in the description will take you to more detailed information for this standard. And if you haven't already done so, please click the like and subscribe buttons below. Thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye.